where I was born, all that kind of
Yeah, just
stuff.
give it. I think individual stories are just important as the whole story,
Yeah.
and really, and this is it's instructive, and I think it's
And what you
benefit.
need to do is go down to ML's and take a picture of that old house before it falls down. Because it's right next door to where ML lives.
But let's start.
But
Just state your
I
name.
was born, my name is Daisy and Azalee Laine Block. I
Okay.
don't use Azalee because I don't like it. But anyway, and I was born in Clarendon County, Manning, South Carolina. And the address where I was born was Route 3, Box 14, Manning, South Carolina. I can remember that.
You were there.
But a lot of people can't remember because it's not that anymore,
Uh huh.
as the house. But I can remember that that was the address
All right.
for the longest, Route 3, Box 14.
And your parents' names.
And my mother's name was Lula May Green Delane, and my daddy's name was Louis Evan Delane. And my grandparents were Daisy McBride Green and William Thomas Green.
So you were named
My
after your
other
grandmother.
grandfather was Henry Charles Delane, and my grandmother was Tisby Gamble Delane. I stayed with my grandparents. My mother went to Allen, finished school, got married right after she got out. But then, after a while, I don't exactly know when she taught school, and she taught down. What was the name of that school that she taught at? I can't think of the name of it, but I was a baby at that point. I have a sister whose name is Arlonial Evelyn Delane Bradford, named for our oldest aunt, Arlonial. And my next sister is Lula Edia Delane. My youngest sister is Marguerite Lewis Delane. She was married to a steward, but they divorced, and she dropped the steward and said that wasn't her name, and told her children, that's your daddy's name, but it ain't mine. And Marguerite Delane was really the founder, was really the glue behind getting the Delane family reunion organized in 1980 when my father died. She started, and then the rest of us, Jay and Gwen and the rest of us, really started finding out all these folk and digging up all the family.
Okay, so how was your childhood?
I
You
worked
grew up
like
with your
ridiculous.
maternal grandparents, right?
I know. I stayed with my grandparents until I was 6, 7.
Mm-hmm.
They came back during the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
They came back from Buffalo because there was no jobs there either. And they moved into a house behind my grandparents, a rental house. And the people who rent the house were Floyd's. But it was a white man's house. And then my aunts and stuff came down and started raising sand, saying, you got all that property over on Junburn Road, that's yours, so why are you renting?
Mm-hmm.
So that's when we moved from over near my grandparents, which I didn't want to do, over to Junburn Road, further down than we live now, but down there. And when we moved, the area that I lived on 301, which was Route 3, was in a place called Halleytown. And Halleytown was named for a man named Hallie Tyndall, which was a black man that owned most of the property over there. That area was very progressive because most of the black people owned their own property, and they were a very progressive group of people, and I liked them.
Mm-hmm.
When they were McBrides, and they were Packs, and they were Cochrans, and all these folk, but all these people own their own property. And so, a community where people own their own property, have their own homes and things like that, is much different from one where the people were sharecroppers and that kind of stuff. And when we moved over on Junburn Road, there were a few people that rented, but most of them were sharecroppers and contract hands and stuff like that. The ones that lived in the area over in Hallitown wanted their children to finish high school and if possible go to college, but they made sure that their children went to school. We had no buses. Now I went to a school in the neighborhood and it was called Hallitown School that Miss Esther Pearson taught, and you would go to that school until you got in about 4th or 5th grade. And then you would walk the 4 miles or 3 miles to the high school, which was called Manning Training School. And you would go on and get the rest of your high school education there. Some of the kids didn't go to her school, but most of the little ones did. And one or two of the older ones stayed there until they got in 6th or 7th grade, because a one-room school with a one teacher. So but you learn all the basic things you need to learn. And then when we moved to Junburn Road, where my grandfather's property was and where the Laine property was, which it was quite a bit of it, the people were not the same, because they wanted to know why why my family was so bent on making us go to school. All they need to do is learn to read and cipher, as they used to say. And 3rd grade or 4th grade was as far as their kids need to go, because they need to work. But that was because of sharecropping and stuff like that. And the white landowners, which owned the property that they worked on, didn't want black kids going to school. Black kids would go to school for a while, but when the crops were out to be gathered, they couldn't go to school as long as their cotton was in the field. So they had to stay there and pick their cotton. And we were different because the cotton was ours. We didn't have to pick it until, you picked it, but you went to school. And when school started, you started school. Sometimes you would come home 12 o'clock or something like that, but basically you were in school. And my mother taught school, so she wasn't going to let us have anything less than what she had. And so my mom was the teacher. And everything that needed anything, when we moved over there, Miss Lula was the person that you come to for all your paperwork. Well, Daddy did a lot of it because he knew. But all of the legal stuff and things like that they had to sign when their kids got ready and had to sign up to go in the military. And all of that, they filled out. And as soon as we got old enough, I think I was in about 7th grade, when folk would come in and Mama said, Daisy, fill that out. And I could, but I didn't want to. But if your parents say you do something, you do it. And fill out registration to go in the military. When Social Security came in, when you had to start paying in Social Security, we filled those out. When they started having to pay income taxes, you had to fill all that out to help them. And they didn't know what they were doing. And a lot of them couldn't even read it if they did.
Now, a lot of people don't know nothing existed before Social Security,
Yeah, but Social Security wasn't Social Security wasn't a thing at first.
Right.
When I was a little girl, it started when I believe was beginning high school. And you had to put in Social Security. When a person would get old enough to have to stop working, they would get something they called old age pension,
Uh-huh.
and that was much of nothing. I also remember when my father first came home, they had what they call the WPA, the NRA, and what Workers
Work Progress
Progress
Administration
Administration,
and National
National
Relief
Relief
Association.
Association.
Yeah.
There was another one, I can't remember what it
Yeah,
was.
those are the programs from Roosevelt.
A lot of the young men went into the CC camps. There were white ones and there were black ones.
The Conservation Corps.
Conservation Corps.
Civilian Conservation Corps. Yeah, that's
Civilian
it.
Conservation Corps.
Okay.
A lot of them, because that was giving the young guys something to do and training them how to do things. And I remember the CC camps and stuff like that, because a lot of black students didn't finish high school. They would go to the CCC. When the the Second World War broke out, a lot of kids stopped school and went into the military, because you didn't have to finish high school at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so they went into the military, because when I graduated, I went to Manning, and we used to walk. Then we went to stay with Uncle J.A. and finish, because that's how I got to finish at Scotch Branch.
Mm-hmm.
When I graduated from high school, it wasn't but 14 of us in the class, but one but 2 boys in there.
Mm-hmm.
One was Ransom Code, whose daddy had whose family had a gigantic farm,
Mm-hmm.
and he was the one pretty much running it. And the other was Fred Dowdy, and Fred was sick, and that's why he couldn't go in the military.
Mm-hmm.
So those were only 2 guys in the class. Most of my classmates, as soon as they got old enough, and at that point, there were about 4 of us in my class, and in the 10th grade too.
Mm-hmm.
That was what we would call age appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Starting with 6th grade, 6 years old. All the rest of the kids in the class was older than we were.
Mm-hmm.
So we, Alonia, Helen Gilliard, Naomi, what was Naomi's last name? I can't think of it now. Dot Reagan and Willie Harvin. We couldn't associate with the other girls because we were babies. We were the right age to be in school. The rest of them girls were courting and all that kind of stuff. And when we'd go for breaks, we were the ones that did the best in the school. the ones of us that was in like that. The rest of them was out talking about their boyfriends.
Uh-huh.
And so y'all can't come up here with us, because we talking about something y'all can't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when we were at Scotch Branch. Now Manning, it was different, because most of the kids that I went to Fairhaven School maybe a half a year. And the person that was teaching the school, my father knew. And he told my mama, they can't go there. They got to go to Manning School, because those people didn't go no further in school than I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I just finished 8th grade, so how can I teach anybody anything?
Mm-hmm.
But the other people's children, that's where they went, and that's where a lot of them stopped when they finished, as far as the teachers at Fairhaven went.
Uh-huh.
But now, if you went on down to Cypress Fork and over on the other road to St. Mark, where the schools were, the people were different, because they owned their own property and they were pushing their children to go on.
Mm-hmm.
But in that particular neighborhood, they were not that education, and they had to do what the people whose property they were farming wanted, and they were sharecroppers, and they knew if they didn't make so much, they got nothing. Because at the end of the year, most of them never got out of debt. They always owed the man. And it wasn't because they didn't, it was because they didn't know how to read and write. And what the man told them was what they took. and they used to call it the deduct party.
Mm-hmm.
That means when he came in there, he deducted everything from what you made and said, man, you owe me for next year. You got to stay here on my farm because you got to pay me. And a lot of the people that lived on those kind of farms, the only way they got away from them is pack up at night and move, run away. And that went on with black folk and the white landowners all over. Now there were some that worked at the pulp plant, worked for Alleman in Alcaloo.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the foresters, and they had these little nasty camps where the families would live, these little shack houses and things like that, and a lot of them cooked was loggers and pulpers and that kind of stuff, because they had that big factory there in Alcaloo, because Alcaloo was Alleman's plant. And they also were paid scrip. They didn't pay them money. So they had to spend the money.
They gave them IOUs.
A piece of paper, no, and they had to go into the company store and buy everything. So they paid in scrip until Roosevelt ordered the man, when they finished working, pay them in money. We don't have but one type of currency, and that's not currency. And I remember when that happened, because one of the men that used to work there used to ride a bicycle, but he had a long thing connected to his bike, and he was hauling the thrown away wood, and Alleman thought he was carrying it to burn. The lumber that he was doing, he carried enough to build him a house. Because his father had property, and he worked there, and they lived in Manning, but he would ride his bicycle to Alcaloo, and he'd work, and he'd bring all this stuff home, and he kept bringing it home and piling up. And of course, the man thought this man was using it and giving it to his neighbors and stuff, using for firewood. He wasn't stupid. But most of the people there, and as soon, the girls were older in second, third, and fourth grade, and so when they got 15, 16, at least 17 and 18, they got married. And of course, that wasn't anything that we planned to do, because I always told, I used to tell boys, marry nobody as stupid as you can't even read.
But your father didn't have that in the plans for y'all to marry young.
No. But you see, they didn't understand that. The other people really didn't understand that Joe Blandon and my daddy, well, Mr. Joe owned his own property too, and a few other people were not in that plan, but we were black like they were. So we played with the kids and stuff like that when we had time to play. But now, I never really had a childhood per se. Because from the time I can remember, we had stuff we had to do besides go to school. And we picked cotton. We did everything anybody else did. And you went to school. So playing and fooling around like the kids who were sharecroppers' children, you didn't. You didn't have time. You had chores, you had work to do, and you worked. And you really worked hard. You chopped cotton. You did everything that that the adults did. The only difference in what we did was we were doing it because what we were working for was ours, not somebody else's. But yeah, I wish I had more time to have played. I wish I had had a childhood. Because when I was at my grandmother's, I did. They owned property and stuff too, but my father didn't really. And as I told him after he grew up, I said, you see, you were doing things, but you don't remember. You were the middle child. You didn't know how hard it was to work like you made us work.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't. It was sister. Well, Vina was always pretending that she was sick. But it was Henry and Bob and Alonio. Those were the older children. And who's the next one? I don't know whether Mose or Leo. I can't remember which one.
I think Mose was older than Leo.
Okay, Mose and Leo. Those were the ones that really were the ones that had to work.
Mm-hmm.
Then when J.A. and Daddy came along, they had to work, but their work wasn't quite as, they weren't put in charge.
Now, I thought a lot of them wound up going to college. A lot of the guys leave and make money.
Wait a minute. My grandfather believed in college.
Mm-hmm.
All of them went to college. Uncle Henry went to Tuskegee. Leo went to State. Bob
Yeah, he told me that.
Bob went to State for a little while. Then he signed with his cousin or brother or whatever it was, because they were bricklayers and plasterers, and learned plastering. I was looking up the census and found Sister Potter and Sister Vina living here, going to Allen in the census.
Uh-huh.
So all of them, because Grandpa used to teach, Grandpa taught school.
I didn't know he taught school also.
Uh-huh. They didn't start, they got that from the top down. It wasn't just Daddy and those who were in the college. Grandpa sent them to college. Daddy didn't go, but that was Daddy's fault. They sent him to what's that lady that built Bethune-Cookman, the school that she went to?
Let me see. That's Mary McLeod Bethune.
Yeah, but they all went to school up there.
Matha.
No, it wasn't Matha.
Matha.
No. Oh gosh, why can't I remember that school name? But anyway, that's where Daddy went to school.
Because Brother Leo, he used to make this statement to me when I was visiting. He said, like, all his brothers went to college, they quit to make money.
Yeah, well, he did too.
Yeah, I know. That's what he was admitting.
Because Leo was supposed to be a veterinarian.
Uh-huh.
He did take part of it. But they all went to school. They all were trained.
Because, like you mentioned Henry, because I was talking with Stephanie and Tina this summer about them talking with their father, because they said they still hadn't gotten a complete story of how their grandfather came to Clayton and sat there for about 6 months until he found the property that the white people were willing to sell him, and it was right for him. And they said they were waiting to see some white guy or some sharecropping deal. He just paid for it.
Mm-hmm. He had lived in Manning. His first wife left him, James and Wilveria's mother. Left him and took the kids.
Okay.
And that, he was just distraught. And then he married, for a while, Hattie. He went and he married Hattie and came back to Manning for a while. But he just wasn't satisfied there, so he picked up and went up near where her family was from. And that was he had the two kids, Carrie and
Bud.
Henry.
Henry. Oh, okay.
Remember
yeah, there was another Henry.
Those
I
two
forgot.
were old.
Okay.
And then when he went, they had the other three, and Hattie died with J.W. And what's the name? Brina's, what's the child name? Mama. Sam. Why can't I think of Uncle Henry's wife? She was
Blanche. You talking?
Blanche. Blanche was the niece of Hattie. And came to stay to help Hattie, and Henry started messing around with her and ended up married to her, and that's when the last child was born. Because that child and Gerald are the same age, and what's her name? Because she still live on the property. If she's still living, I don't know if she's still living or not, but
I can't think of the name right now.
But Charlie was what we called the oldest. That boy, his name was Henry Charles, but we called him
Charles Joe,
Charlie.
yeah.
And I used to call Carrie Elise, because that's what he called her,
Mm-hmm.
Elise. Carrie Elise and Henry Charles.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a space between them because he used to drive a motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
And Mama used to say he would come to school to pick up the kids because she was in school at Manning at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And they were younger than she. And say he'd drive up there and one would jump in front of him and one would jump up on the back and he'd take off of that motorcycle, taking them kids home.
All right, let's kind of get back to your life, even though
Okay.
this is a lot of good stuff.
Um,
All right, you're going into the army.
no, I hadn't gone to the army yet. I came to Allen before I went.
Oh, okay.
I was there, and then me and the teachers couldn't get along in Manning, and we had to walk, and because we walked to school, we walked from where we live, and that was a good 3 or 4 miles
Uh-huh.
to Manning every day, and walk back because there were no buses for black kids. If you got in the way of one of them buses and was near any water, them white folk would come by with the drivers, and I remember, and would wet you up.
Mm-hmm.
And my daddy got sick of that. And one day when the bus was coming by, he stood out there with a shotgun and told him to stop. Because there weren't kids that were driving the buses at that point. There were grown white men.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if you wet and splash water on one of my girls again, you dead.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, they always called the Laines crazy.
Okay, I thought it started with my life.
And the reason was it started with I don't know who, I think it started with Grandpa's children. Because they didn't take down, Grandpa was the first person in Clarendon County that sued a white man and won.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And they didn't take, which one of them threatened to shoot this man
Mm-hmm.
if he pat Sister Bina on the butt.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me, you touch my sister again, blow your damn head off.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, they were kin to the Gambles.
Mm-hmm.
The Gambles were white, but you know by Mama,
Yeah.
she got to have some white. But the Gambles claimed them as their family.
Mm-hmm.
So the Gambles pretty much ran Manning.
Mm-hmm.
And the Laines didn't take down off of anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, they had this property around there, so you were crazy because you don't bother them.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you catch them out by themselves, you don't bother them. Because them fools will kill you, and they don't care. So they were scared. They were afraid to come in and try the lynch thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we just wasn't bothered. But now, when, who was it, left home, I don't, one of the boys left home because he threatened to kill.
I thought it was Henry. I know my grandfather went through that. And
Man, your grandfather went all over and ended up down in Georgia, Florida.
Atlanta. He went to Atlanta.
With Sister Potter.
Mm-hmm.
But he got mad because his dad was going to beat him about something he didn't do. And he left. But the one that threatened to shoot the man,
Mm-hmm.
and he decided to leave because he didn't want, they might have caught him off by himself.
Mm-hmm.
Because he told you, touch my sister, I will kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And, but growing up in Manning, and that was, so this was what we grew up with. You don't take down to people. If you're right or they're bothering you for some reason, you don't start anything.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't let people push you around either.
Mm-hmm.
So we weren't bullies, but we just beat the shit out of you if you try anything. I walked from there until I was in, 10th grade.
Uh-huh.
Not where we live now, but down on the other property. No house down there because it burnt down. But I walked to Manor School. My mother taught at other places, and she took ML and Edie with her to school. Well, ML was born and Mama was working, so ML had a babysitter, the lady that lived up in the house up there from us, Irving, Carolina. Irving used to rent, and he was a plasterer, so he really didn't need the property. He just did it. He was a drinker too, and he was a womanizer, so his family didn't have that much. But she came from a family that was from the side of Manning that my mother's family was. But anyway, there were kids there, and some of them went to school and some didn't. And by my generation, a lot of the children went on to high school. But the ones that was older than I didn't. They would finish right there if wherever they were going to school. But now, where my mother taught, Mama taught at Fairhaven for 1 year, and the people that were trustees, well, the white folk were, and the black people thought they were. And the money that came to pay the teachers, the white folk was telling them that we can't pay them no more than that. So black people didn't get, and they could talk, if they could talk you into working for less. And then Mama got a job teaching at Cypress Fork for a while, and then she left from there and went to, what's the name of the school? And then to Manning. But it was during the time when, the people that was over Fairhaven couldn't do anything, and the folk that was supposed to be with the money that came from the state for the black schools, they would squander and wouldn't pay the black teacher what they were supposed to be paid, because we ain't got the money. And their thing was, our taxes, we have to pay taxes. And Daddy got up in a meeting one time, he said, and we pay taxes too. And if you didn't have those black people working on your farm to pay taxes, where would you get the money from? And that was something else, because they didn't back down from them, but Mama worked her. And see, Mama had what they call an A certificate. Most of the black teachers barely finished high school. And they were the ones that was hired. That's why we didn't go to Fairhaven, because Daddy knew the woman there. He said, she didn't finish but 9th grade. How's she going to teach you in 5th grade?
Yeah.
And so he tell you got as much education as she got, so you got to go where you can learn something. So that's when we started walking the Manning to school. And of course, when we started walking, Uncle Leo's, Edward and Herbert, we called him Roland, used to walk, and the people that lived on the Epses used to live on the part of the farm where we live now, that worked for Leo. And all those kids went to Manning School. Well, they had gone before they moved out there, so we would always, and then Daddy's Gamble family from Alcaloo, Mr. Jake Hodge's children, he was a Reverend Jake Hodge. And we would meet up at the intersection out there of 521, 301. They come out when we would come, and then there would be a group of us walk into the school at Manning. And we were all relatives, though. We were walking to school, but we were all relatives, and then we would walk from there. And then I went, and the school burnt down. They never did build a school back. We went to school for 2 years in churches, because they swore they didn't have the money to build a school back. So then they brought barracks. The CCC was, I don't know, they brought old barracks from Fort Jackson and stuff like that. And that's what they put there for us to go to school in at Manning. And that stayed until this, I think it was when they first started working with civil rights
Okay.
before they really built a school back.
Mm-hmm.
And it was called Manning Training School.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we walked by the white Manning High School to go down to school.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an elementary school now, right across from where Fleming Delane Funeral Home is,
Uh-huh.
in the school over there. That's where the high school was.
Okay.
And when it burned, for 2 years, we went to different churches in Manning, the different black churches.
Mm-hmm.
Had us there, but you had nothing to work with because you were in the church proper.
Mm-hmm.
Your class was back here, that class was over there. And so when it comes to biology and stuff like that, you had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they finally built the school, they brought in all these big barracks is what they were.
Mm-hmm.
And they cut them up and made classrooms.
Uh-huh.
But you still didn't have, black kids just didn't have anything to any type of scientific stuff. And the basketball team played outside. There was no gyms.
Mm-hmm.
So you played, but you didn't have football.
Mm-hmm.
And the basketball games
Now,
were
did
outside.
one of y'all play basketball?
Alonia played for a little while.
Okay. I thought, well, I remember one of y'all either, I couldn't remember was it ML or one of y'all.
No, ML never. ML was on the band, honey. ML played a clarinet. ML played a clarinet, and ML majored in French in college.
Okay.
Because she was so good in French in high school. But, that was in Manning. Alonia played basketball for a little while. But then when we finished Scotts Branch,
Mm-hmm.
then Alonia and I went to Allen. But when I went to Allen, I didn't know what I wanted to do. We had to take a test because we went as what they call sub-freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant that although the state didn't set up so you would have what you needed, but you had to have so many hours in something before you could be a freshman in college.
Mm-hmm.
So what the black schools did, they brought the kids in, and then they would teach them, and then you would test it. And once you passed the test in English and whatever it is you needed,
Mm-hmm.
then you could be a freshman. So they called them sub-freshmen.
Okay.
And I think Morris and Benedict and Allen and all of those, but now in Sumter, a lot of kids who could afford it went to Lincoln and Sumter because they had the next grade up.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot went to Charleston and wherever they had family or who could afford to send their kids and board them to finish school.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kids, when they finish what was there in Manning and Somerton, didn't go on to school.
Mm-hmm.
They either got married and worked in the pulpwood, or they lived on farms, or they went to different places. Virginia, Maryland, went to Virginia to work in a peanut place. Went to Maryland, and a lot of women work as maids and all that. And they went north.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that was after the Great Migration, because a lot of black people left the South and went north when they call it the Great Migration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the reason these students could leave and go there is because their family was already in these places, and they would go and get jobs,
Uh-huh.
doing all sorts of stuff. And a lot of them did quite well because
Mm-hmm.
they were smart enough to do it, and they could train. So they were trained on all sorts of jobs. And a lot of them didn't. But my mother even worked as a maid for a while because before they came, because they went to, I told you, yes, and they went to Buffalo, Daddy came back home and he wanted to farm. So my Aunt Annie, my mother's sister, was adopted sister, but her sister was living in Baltimore. So Mama stopped and was a maid for a group of Jewish people, and their names were B. Millers. That was their last name, B. Miller. And while she stayed and worked there, she stayed and worked. So Daddy could get the money to buy the farm equipment he needed.
Mm-hmm.
And she worked until then, because when she came back, it wasn't that easy for her to get a job, because those folk, Mama had a college degree. Well, they had 2-year college, which was called the LI degree, and I can't remember what that meant. But anyway, she had a college degree, and most of the country schools, a lot of them had these people that didn't want to pay anybody who had an A certificate.
Uh-huh.
Because when they, man, you say, you got an A certificate, and we can't afford you.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what the white man was telling him. And Daddy said, the money is down here. But, Louis, you do that, but I don't buy these white people. That be money. He said, don't you pay taxes?
Yep.
That's our money. But so many of us didn't, because they were deathly afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as they could keep them afraid, they
Mm-hmm.
kept them afraid. So, and a lot of times the girls would finish high school, but the boys would have to stay out of school so much to work until as soon as that boy got old enough to leave home. He'd leave
Mm-hmm.
and get a job doing what he wanted to. Then when the war came, and you didn't have to finish high school to go to in the military, most of the young men, 17, 18 years old, went into the military.
Mm-hmm.
And when they came out of the army and they were fighting to get veterans' rights, and finally they made them put a school in Manning for the veterans that had not finished high school,
Mm-hmm.
so they could finish high school.
Okay.
Now, a lot of the guys that was in the CCC and stuff had finished and went into the military from the CC.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of the young black kids did that, the young black men, because the CC wasn't for women, it was just for guys.
Okay.
And so they went from one military type thing to the other.
Okay.
And as I told them, I said, and they were the ones that destroyed the property, because they did a lot of ditch digging and all this other kind of stuff. They cleaned cemeteries, they dug ditches. And so a lot of the marshlands were destroyed by the ditches.
Okay. They drained them and
Mm-hmm.
so they made them into farmland.
Yeah, so they could make them in the farmland, they drained them. And of course, your marshlands just went, but that was giving them busy work. That was Roosevelt's thing to
Mm-hmm.
give people jobs. Because Daddy worked for the relief for a hot minute. And they used to give them food,
Uh-huh.
ham and grits, cheese, and that kind of stuff.
So now after you finished Allen, you
And when I
left for
went to-
Allen.
No, when I went to Allen, I could do well in some grades and I didn't in the others. So I stayed there for a while, and then when they opened up, you see, women were in the military during World War II.
Yeah.
But then they opened up and said they would accept women back in the military. So that's when I volunteered.
Uh-huh.
Because I told Daddy, I said, I don't know what I want to do. And I know I ain't going nowhere to work because Sister Mamie and all of it, come up here, you can stay with me and work. I ain't going to go stay with them. And when I told Sister Potter what I wanted to do, he said, that's what you do then.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want to go stay with nobody. Because you could come and stay with me. Well, I would have stayed with her better than I'd have stayed with the rest of them.
Uh-huh.
But you don't want to work with no white woman. You don't. She said, I do that because at that time Dan was the super of the house she lived in,
Mm-hmm.
and of the big apartment complex, and she would do some things. But she said, and I don't want you working for them. So if you want to go in the army, you go.
Uh-huh.
And that's when I went in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, I got married, and found out that asshole was married already.
Oh, okay.
And Gerald came along, and I came home because now if you have a child in the military, you don't have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
But then you could be married, but you couldn't have babies if you were in there. And
Uh-huh.
it changed under Truman, changed a lot of things, and then Eisenhower, and then
Mm-hmm.
it finally found, as they say, if a man can stay in the army with a family, why can't a woman stay? That does not take away. She works on other jobs with her children.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, then I came back and went back to school.
Mm-hmm.
And I had met Clarence. So when I finished school, then Clarence and I got married.
Uh-huh.
And that's when I left and went to Kansas and plundered all over the world. Before we settled, and he got tired of being in there. He was in the army over 10 years, but he just said he couldn't handle it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And he got out, and I said, well, you said you were going to get out to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
Either you go to school or you go back in.
Oh, you told him that?
Oh, yes. Because you see, Clarence was sergeant first class.
Uh-huh.
And he was supposed to go. He was thinking about going to be a Green Beret and go to helicopter pilot school.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, now, that would be good if you want. I said, but if you really, because he always wanted to go to school. But when he was 17, this woman got pregnant. And his grandmama, the goody woman she was, you got to marry her.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked her name was Daisy too. I said, why? Take care of the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he went in the military. And that's where I met him. And come when he came home, she'd had a baby by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that split.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we got married in July, and she got killed in November.
Oh, wow.
She was playing games with the other man she was gone with.
Oh.
He had sent her to school, and she finished beautician school,
Mm-hmm.
and he had paid for it, and he had shot his first wife. He was a policeman's son.
Oh.
So when she told him, put him out, I mean, she was throwing a part of her graduation, and told him that she was leaving. And he said no, and Tanya was upstairs in their apartment. And he pulled out his gun and blew her brain out and his.
Wow.
And poor Tanya, she was the first person downstairs when she heard the gunshot wound.
Mm-hmm.
And when she got there, she saw both her mama and this guy on the floor. The other lady that lived in Providence said she was getting down there because she knew that she didn't need. But Tanya was down there, little 7-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Tanya ever got over that because
Uh-huh.
I didn't know at that point that I needed to keep her in psych therapy. We took her,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't that much for black people down here. No, and then
Mm-hmm.
because I married him, and I was married to him when that happened. Because we got married, I said in July, and that happened, and then he had given her mama custody of Tanya because Bert said she couldn't take care of no baby. So all of his child support and all of his housing was going to the grandmother.
Okay.
When we got married, of course, the housing stopped
Mm-hmm.
because I went to Kansas, then we went wherever he would go. And so he left her there. And she told her, now the only money you're going to get is what I'm sending to you. And he was sending her a little more than what the Army said he had to send her. And then when he decided to get out, he said he was taking his child, and honey, she had her. And he said, Yeah, I signed over that you as long as until I could take care of her. He said,
Mm-hmm.
Mom is dead and I'm her only living parent. So,
Mm-hmm.
and so he had to go to court
Uh-huh.
to take her. And so we stayed in Gary. Well, Tanya and I came to South because I wanted to work. His mother promised to take care of Michael.
Mm-hmm.
When we got there, he got a job working at, what was the name of the place? One of the steel mills.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I said, now I'm going to go to work. I'm not taking care of any baby. He got a good job. And he can work in the steel mill just like Clarence's daddy did. And I said, not on my watch, he won't. He got out the military to go to school. Either go to school or go back in the military and finish them other 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote down here, down to Manning. And Mama sent me something, so I wrote Mr. Parker, who was the principal of the high school down there,
Mm-hmm.
and told him I was coming home and I was looking for a job and anything they could do to help, just did that. And so I packed up Tanya and Michael, and I said, now, you work and pay off the bills, and then you bring your butt down here and go to school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you got in Allen.
Oh, okay.
I said, because as I said, either you go get your college degree or you go back in the military.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wash enough dirty clothes from my daddy. I ain't being no steel mill worker wife washing no nasty clothes.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to work. No, I don't. But I am. And I told him, I said, I will always work because we are a team, but I'll always have my own money.
Mm-hmm.
And it will go in as one. But you should never, it's mine. I take mine out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for a while that she really didn't quite care about me very much
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't let her run my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then because Clarence's sisters and brother was a whole lot younger than he, because Clarence was born when his mom was 13 or 14.
Wow.
And Daddy Laine, who adopted him, is not his father, was not,
Mm-hmm.
He was kin to the daddy. The daddy was white, but Laine was kin to him.
Oh, okay.
But Clarence didn't know anything about his father. And Laine adopted him, so that was, and because they forced her to marry another man, his name was Camp.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how white Clarence was up there. And this man was black and his mama was dark too. And the family, they ain't none of his child. There ain't no child in my family look like that.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, they separated, and then she got involved with Daddy Laine. And Clarence went in the military because Clarence was raised by his grandparents in St. Louis. He went to Gary
Okay.
after he was grown. And as I said, I stayed there for a little while. I stayed there about a year.
So he got a chemistry degree from Allen.
And then he went on to Duke.
Oh, okay. I didn't know he did that.
Mm-hmm.
All I knew, he went to Allen. I had no idea.
Yeah, well, they used to give you scholarships and all that kind of stuff because he did all his advance in the summer, just like I did.
Mm-hmm.
Because I got my master's from Columbia University.
Oh, okay.
That's how Michael was up there training you to be on the potty.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's how I got into speech pathology. I have no speech pathology down here.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to do it. And now, the reason I wanted to either be a speech pathologist, a physical therapist, or an occupational therapist.
Uh-huh.
And that was because Edie was born with, she had cerebral palsy.
Uh-huh.
There weren't anybody to do anything
And
for
actually, we
her.
should talk about her because
Huh?
I got all these fond memories of Edie at the family reunion, her poetry and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a friend recently who passed away who was deaf, and because he was just around the community, almost all the boys knew a lot of sign language because of
Mm-hmm.
him. And Edie was like, she just a member of the family. And I just remember her, even from a young kid, she had this sense of humor. I used to always love and just ask her something.
Well, you need to go visit her because she's sick and can't get about.
Oh, okay, cause I.
Because that's why Alonia, ML went to Raleigh to see her. You know, ML's family's in Raleigh. Where do you live?
I live in Durham.
Okay. In Wendell, but you know, right out of Raleigh. That's where Wayne is, because that's where his wife is from.
Okay.
And she goes there to see them grandchildren. I don't blame her.
Mhm.
And Alonia was up here, so Edie was pretty much by herself. We had family that was supposed to pick her up yesterday, but Alonia left this morning going back home.
Mhm.
She said, you know, I got to go see Bad Edie because ML ain't there. And Alonia's supposed to go tomorrow to not Hilton Head, to Myrtle Beach,
Mhm.
because a group of the kids she taught having class reunion.
Mhm.
So of course they invite her to everything, every class reunion they had, because she taught at this school called Battery Park in Neesmith, South Carolina.
Okay.
And Alonia's business kids got jobs that nobody else. When they went to college, they wanted to went. A lot of them went to state, and they want to know. Wait a minute, how in the world do you know all of this? Most kids come out of high school don't know this.
Mhm.
And Miss Bradford taught me. Well, she got her master's from state. So one of the guys said, "You mean Alonia Bradford taught you?" He said, "Yeah." Well, she's a darn good teacher. So now they invite her when they decide to have, well, what they do, a lot of the kids get together and it's not a class reunion. It's more of a school type of reunion.
Uh-huh.
So they're having a weekend down at Myrtle, at the beach.
Mhm.
So of course, she said she isn't going until in the morning.
Uh-huh.
And she'll be there until Sunday.
Mhm.
I was talking about the place she was going to stay in. Tommy was telling her, boy, you stay in one of the fancy hotels. She said, my children put me in. Because she has kids all over. She even went to France to visit one.
Wow.
The girl sent for her.
Wow.
And I said, you really, but coming, because you see, she grew up in similar neighborhood we did. And she just knew, and she didn't take no for an answer.
Mhm.
She said, you can learn this. If I know it, you can learn it.
Uh-huh.
And this is what you do in business, as this and as that. It's going to be hard enough for you to get a job in this profession.
Mhm.
But if you don't really know more than the other folk know, you're not going to get a job.
Mhm.
And her kids everywhere. And they all came out little old Neesmith, South Carolina,
Uh-huh.
out from King Street in Williamsburg County, one of the poorest counties in the state.
Uh-huh.
And you know these counties, Clarendon and all those counties are the poorest counties,
Yeah.
because they're the poorest counties in South Carolina.
Uh-huh.
And some of them, you've heard them talk about the 95 corridor.
Yeah.
And people on that 95 corridor, black and white, don't have anything.
Mhm. Now, getting back to you again. Okay.